Thank you for staying with us here in Scope, viewers. In this last segment of today's show, we're going to discuss Myanmar. Rights groups are saying that Myanmar has jailed around 21 Rohingya adults, and that number, in fact, does include some children, I should say, for trying to travel to escape the dismal camps amid severe restrictions that exist right now on everyday life, specifically for the Rohingya, who are now under travel restrictions just within Myanmar itself. To be able to travel within Myanmar to other places, they require all sorts of permissions and as well guarantees from the hosts in other cities, be it Yangon or otherwise, that they will then return. I believe it is within 45 days or so back to Rakhine or otherwise. A lot of these people then pay traffickers and others to try to get out of the country or to just transport them to Yangon. Around 270 to 380 pounds is the going rate for those sorts of traffickers. And this, again, I'm talking about just within Myanmar's borders itself. Quite a disturbing situation, really, if we look at this objectively. Let's discuss this further. We're joined now by Tun Khin, who is the president of the Burmese Rohingya organization UK. He's joining us now from London. Joining us from Dhaka is Asif Munier, who is a migration and displacement specialist, formerly worked with UN agencies in Bangladesh. And joining us from Rome is Lyal S. Sunga, who is a visiting professor at the Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law. Lyal, Asif, and Tun Khin, thank you to all three of you for joining us. Tun Khin, I'd like to start with you. What do you make of these latest arrests and the restrictions placed on Rohingya to travel just within Myanmar?
Well, this is going on for many years. Actually, this is the first time media picked up what's happening to the Rohingyas. Many Rohingyas, when they are facing unbearable situation in their native land, so they're trying to get out of their Rakhine state where genocide is ongoing, So this is totally, unacceptable. And Rohingyas, we are recognized ethnic and citizen of Burma. They're taking away our rights now. This is one plan of systematically to wipe out the community. This is one of the weakening points the way Burmese military been doing and government doing for many years. So this is how the condition is. The condition of Rohingya, you can see where genocide is ongoing these days until for more than 4 decades until today. This is what the situation we are facing. This is how international community have to see now what Rohingyas, even they cannot travel from one town to another town, where they want to keep Rohingya in an open prison. Whenever they become unbearable situation, they try to flee from that camp. So that's the way of the situation people are facing for a long time. Now people are trying to leave. So this is the condition.
Asif, it's, as I said in the introduction, this is really disturbing because, it's one thing to say that a person has freedom of movement beyond one's country's borders, but it's quite another when your movement is restricted within your own country, isn't it?
Yes, of course. And as Tun Khin said, that, this has been going on for some time, but it seems that it's increasing day by day. In Myanmar, at the moment, there's a smaller number of Rohingya left because of the persecution. A lot of them had moved to Bangladesh or wherever they could escape. But because of the recent times, in recent times, there have been discussions that UN, there have been sort of critical positions by different countries about Myanmar, and it seems that they are taking it out on the Rohingya refugees who are still there. They have been persecuted, they have been sort of restricted to their mobility and different rights, and no wonder that they want to escape from that. And of course, the traffickers take advantage of that. So that's again, a double jeopardy for them. They are persecuted in the camp areas that they live in, restrictions, but when they want to leave, they are in the hands of traffickers who exploit them for money. And in terms of abuse, no guarantee that they can escape to wherever they want to escape to.
Lyal, I want to get your thoughts on this from a humanitarian law perspective too. As I had put to Asif, it's one thing to talk about, the right to travel beyond one's country's borders, but just to travel within one's own country. Like this is genuinely, as the Rohingya have said from day one, that they've been treated as foreigners within their own country. This is like living proof of that, isn't it?
It certainly is, and that's why some commentators have likened this situation to a situation of apartheid, where you have a separate legal regime, separate rights, lack of rights, so extreme violations of rights systematically. And, the whole denial of the rights of citizenship that goes back to, 1982. And then also these restrictions of movement, right to movement, go back to 1992. So this is not a new thing, but it's obviously become very, very intensified recently. And as you and my colleagues have said, the situation is overall just extremely unbearable. And it's being intensified very, very cruelly. So this is very much like an apartheid system where, you remember in South Africa, there were internal pass laws. It's an obvious violation of the right to movement. It's just one more category of rights that are being seriously violated, in addition to the other very serious violations that have been instituted over the many years.
Indeed. Tun Khin, just put this into context for us about the kind of effect this limiting of one's freedom of movement has on the Rohingya people. The reports that I read said that there have been some who have died because they have not been able to travel because of medical care. Is that also what you're hearing?
Yes, even my friends, some of my friends told me a few weeks ago, and some of my friends told me a few months ago, that's where I grew up in Sitwe, in IDP camps. They can't go to hospital. Even a pregnant woman who really need care to give birth a baby, she cannot visit to Sitwe hospital. And like other cities also, Mongdo, Butino, this is how that totally they restricting medical care, freedom of movement, and especially to go and buy shopping, to go to the market. What they do, they blocking the people, they try to get money, and they demand a lot of money. That is how the systematically they doing for these things for many years, and that's the way why we are talking that international community. This is the situation. Totally, genocide is ongoing. That's what we are demanding. International community, this need to be addressed immediately, intervening to stop this genocide.
Okay, so then let's address then that, Asif, because you're sitting in Bangladesh, and I know that Bangladesh is, of course, hosting a very large number of Rohingya at this point in time, and there have been attempts to try to repatriate them voluntarily. No one is obviously seemingly wanting to do that, because certainly the situation back home in Myanmar is not very conducive to any such return at this point, at least with villages razed, etc. What do you make of how the international community has reacted in all of this? And I know we've spoken about this a number of times, but it doesn't seem that much is changing, is there?
Exactly. In terms of the humanitarian support, there is some, although it's slow in terms of the response to the Rohingya in Bangladesh, but also it is getting difficult internally as well. The tensions between Bangladeshis and Rohingya, particularly in the region where they're staying in Cox's Bazar, naturally because of there's a large population, guests who are here in Bangladesh. That being said, situation within the camps are to some extent still better in Bangladesh, I would say, than on the other side in Myanmar. But also, like you were mentioning, and Tun Khin was mentioning about the medical treatment, for years before, even during the current system of genocide and the oppression, a lot of Rohingyas were able to cross borders into Bangladesh for medical treatment as well through a pass. Now, since the crisis in the last 2-3 years, that has also stopped. So, their options for not just medical treatment, for life, is getting more and more difficult. And again, from Bangladesh as well. They do see that this is a temporary situation, they felt, but it's still, there's no clear solution in sight. So even from Bangladesh, they're also trying to travel out through irregular ways by dangerously crossing the sea, again, with the help of the traffickers. Yeah. They can't go back to Myanmar, but they're thinking of going somewhere else if they can survive.
All right, so then Lyle, then this again goes back to, and there's a number of issues obviously around the world that one can, point to international organizations like the UN and other international law bodies as well for why they're muted really in their response. It's one thing, Lyle, to say on the part of the UN that, oh, the Rohingya are the world's most persecuted minority. That's nice in words, but then what are they doing really? Why isn't the world really actually acting on this?
I think it's it's quite clear. I mean, if you look at the September 18th, 2018 request of UK, France, United States, and a number of other countries, Cote d'Ivoire and others, who asked for a meeting of the Security Council, requested the President of the Security Council to hold a meeting, and that was done by procedural vote, to discuss the issue. France and I should say Russia and China vehemently objected to that, and they didn't want to discuss this problem in front of the Security Council. Now, let's just remind ourselves that all the apparatus is there in the UN Charter, under Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter, under Article 39. It's the Security Council's obligation to determine a threat or breach of international peace and security. This is clearly one of those, and we've seen it going on for a long time. And if you have one of the veto powers, and here you have two, not willing to even discuss it, and the arguments they gave were extremely flimsy, that's blocking action. So at the level, and that is the first purpose of the UN, is maintenance of international peace and security. Now, that avenue is blocked. So the reasons they gave was that, well, it'll duplicate other, the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly because they're dealing with human rights. That's a pretty ridiculous argument. The other avenue that is open, however, is the International Criminal Court, which is conducting investigations, and that thankfully was a preliminary investigation. And I just want to add one more thing,
sure,
and that is that the prosecutor in July requested the court to go from a preliminary investigation to a full-blown investigation.
Okay.
Now, we all know that the ICC is in a difficult position. It may never show up there. It's difficult to get access. On the other hand, maybe scaring some of these commanders will, with individual criminal responsibility, will have more effect.
Hopefully so. And we'll leave that as our final word, but I appreciate all three of our guests for their time and, of course, their insight and putting this all into context for us. So, as Lyle speaking to us from Rome, we're also joined by Tun Khin, who is speaking to us from London, and Asif, who is speaking to us from the Bangladeshi capital, Dhaka. Now, viewers, certainly this situation vis-a-vis Rohingya in Myanmar itself gets ever more disturbing every time more reports come out. The fact that they cannot, even within their own country, move around freely, where they were once allowed to, by the way. We talk about the right to free travel and, free movement, around the world and beyond one's country's borders. But then this is just free movement within one's country's borders as well for things, basic things like medical care, etc. As Tun Khin was describing, even pregnant women are not being allowed to go to hospitals to be able to deliver babies safely. Some of them dying, in fact, in the process then because they are not receiving proper medical care. Others also die because they're not receiving proper medical care. In this case, a 5-year-old was also arrested because the child, as well as the adults that he was traveling with, were trying to travel to the capital, Yangon, seemingly to possibly then travel beyond the border to look for safety from a situation of persecution. And that certainly is also a human right, isn't it, to look for safety from the persecution that you are suffering at home. We'll keep a close eye, of course, on the situation around Rohingyas, as we always do here in Scope. I'll leave it there for now, though. I've been Waqar Rizvi. Thanks for watching.